Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and this is a vlog of my late autism and ADHD diagnosis. First, I want to start this video by saying, thank you so much to everyone who supported me in my last video where I talked about coming out bisexual, demisexual. It wasn't necessarily an easy video to film. I mean, it was and it wasn't, because it was such a huge, a big, aha moment in unmasking my autism that I was just so eager to talk about it. But also, just like anything in this world, it's not anything. What am I saying? I need to focus. Coming out and talking about your sexuality online is not easy for anybody, right? And it's interesting because I've been an ally in the community for a very long time. I've always considered myself an LGBTQ ally, but there's definitely a perspective shift once you've what I like to say, what I said was crossed over the rainbow. And all of a sudden, I'm paying attention to or hearing things differently than I ever did before. And I never realized how much bi-erasure there is in the LGBTQ community, especially for a bisexual person who is married to somebody of the opposite gender. Apparently, there is a lot of people out there who just don't want that to exist. They want people to be either straight or gay, lesbian. They don't want the possibility of bisexuality to matter. And they also think that body count should matter. But asexual people exist. You can be attracted to people without necessarily wanting to have sex with them. And who you're attracted to doesn't have anything to do with how many people you have had sex with. So just wanted to kind of put that out there and support bisexual people who do not get enough representation in media. And I might be very, very new to being out as pride, queer. But it's interesting because it's once that switch flipped in my head, it was yeah, I exist, I'm valid. A lot of the things that made it where I never realized I was bi 100% have to do with my autistic mask. And as I'm unmasking, all of that is now available and just right there in the forefront of my brain. But that's not what this video is going to be about. Okay, I'm trying to adjust the lighting in here. The sun today is at a very weird overcast and it's hurting my eyes. So I'm adjusting my window shade a little bit here and there. This video, I kind of wanted to talk about just relationships in general. As an autistic person, that's kind of been the theme the last couple of weeks, is sorting out and working on various relationships in my life. And I've realized that there's, how do I say this? There's kind of sorry, I'm having a hard time with words today. Bear with me, be patient, please. Sorry. Okay, there's nothing to apologize for. There's nothing to apologize for. My brain is doing an autistic brain thing right now, and that is who I am and how I communicate. And I'm asking for grace in that. So what I am trying to communicate is that as I'm unmasking autism, there have been people in my life who did not take well to the fact that I came out autistic. I don't know why I said it that way. I came out, like, announced my autism. Like, I'm no longer going to mask it anymore. Like, I got a diagnosis and I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not anymore. And I did have some friendships end because of that. Nobody said anything super direct because, that would be really ableist and people don't want to be ableist. So they find other reasons. But it's directly related to being autistic, or they just basically stopped talking to me and like the friendship just drifted off. And so there's no way of knowing 100% if it was due to my autism or not, but the timing was pretty circumspect, right? But that being said, also, there have been some friendships that I made before I got my diagnosis, and I was still super heavily masked as an autistic person, which means that I was very much into people-pleasing mode. And I would try, my brain, it wasn't conscious on my part. This is just something that I've always done in friendships. My brain would try to mold itself to be the perfect companion for whoever I am trying to be friends with. That's just part of what the autistic mask does. And so some friendships have been able to see that as I'm unmasking, I am changing and they are making room for me to grow and express myself newly. Like my husband is an excellent example of this. He's been so supportive of my unmasking journey from day one. And it's taken a lot of communication because a lot of it is I don't even know what I want. I don't even know who I am. I know who I'm not sometimes, but it doesn't mean I know who I am or what I want. One of the things that my mask never let me do was say distinctly things that I want out of life, because all I've ever wanted from my mask, all my masks allowed is for me to want what other people want me to want. I know that sounds really confusing, but my mask in survival mode wanted to figure out what other people wanted me to be, and then I was that thing. Well, some friendships didn't survive that because once I started to unmask, some friends were say they would accept me and my autistic traits, but then nothing really changed. Like they didn't make space or room for those changes. And so I've had some friendships end in a more from my end. Like I've distanced myself from a couple of different people because even though they said that they were accepting me, in the end, they still wanted and behaved in ways that showed no, they wanted my masked self. And so that I'm just having to really learn how to create boundaries by getting clear exactly what I want. And again, that has not been easy for me to articulate because my autistic mask is still waiting for the other person to tell me what I need to want. And it's like, no, without any other consideration, if there was nobody else to be concerned about, in an ideal situation, what is it I want from this relationship, this situation, whatever it is. And like trying to quiet all the noise and listen to my own concerns from almost a selfish perspective. And I'm not saying that that is what's going to happen, but just taking a moment to feel it from within and then saying it out loud, out into the world, which is like not easy for somebody who's masked for so long. And then seeing what that other person does with it. Because with these new boundaries that you create from things that you want, that might not be something that's acceptable to another person. And so, you have to be able to be willing to then find compromises or realize that some things just may not be able to continue on. One relationship in particular that I have been working very, very hard on, and I've made videos on this in the past, you can kind of go back and look for them, is the relationship with my mom, because I very, very much love my mom and I want to forge a new relationship with her that looks different as an unmasked autistic person than it did as a masked one. And this has become super important, and it's been such a process because there was so much where, again, when I was talking about as I'm unmasking, like I couldn't even verbalize what I wanted because I didn't have the ability to do so yet. There was too many things that I had to work through to even get to a point to be able to say, like, these are things that I want out of this relationship. And one of the reasons why the relationship with my mom has been so difficult to navigate, and the reason why I'm sharing about this publicly is, one, my mom is very supportive of me. She also wants our relationship to work, and she knows that my work, what I'm doing here on this YouTube channel, is hopefully making a big difference for other people and navigating relationships with their loved ones. And so I'm like trying to be an example of communication, the hard parts and the good parts. But so the autistic mask, one of the people who I masked around the most was my mom, and it wasn't intentional. The autistic mask is created by your brain when you were a child for survival. My mom divorced my dad when I was just out of third grade, and that's a very pivotal part in a young child's life. And my brain knew that if I made my mom's life easier, then that was going to be good for me. Like, I didn't want to make anything harder for my mom. And so I became a big, I became a perfect, good little girl, and I always deferred to my mom. I never set any boundaries with my mom because, one, I had very black and white thinking of the autistic brain, and as my mom, I thought that she always had that there didn't have to be any boundaries. And that, when you're a really little kid, there aren't as many boundaries with your parents. There's some, but not that many. But as you get older, there's different ways that children kind of spread their wings and grow away from their mom. But because I had always seen my mom as like a really close friend, as I got older, my mom became like too integrated into my life in a way that was limiting, because I felt like every single thing I did, I was still doing for my mom's approval, and I was doing that my mom was always included. Like if I joined a crafting club, my mom wanted to come along with me, and sometimes that's okay, but when it's everything and always, it became too much. And I got to the point where I was thinking in the back of my head, before I said or did anything, would my mom approve of this? Because my mask was still trying to be a good little girl, even at the age of 40. And one day, shortly after my 40th birthday, I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I don't need my mom's permission to, like, the biggest thing that started to crack my mask was when I started my cooking YouTube channel. Because when I was thinking about being on YouTube, the first thought was, would my mom approve of this? And that just made me so upset that I was worried about my mom's approval. That was actually the beginning of my mask coming apart. And you got to understand, from my mom's perspective, it wasn't because she was trying to be controlling. And people will hear one side of a story and they're going to think one thing. And I'm telling you, it's not that. My mom's always been so supportive. And in her mind, she was right there being my cheerleader, supporting me, cheering me on. Like if I was going to start a YouTube channel, then she wanted to be there, like helping me pick out the name of it. And da-da-da. But I wanted to do something by myself without my mom for the first time in my life. Because I'd never done anything independently. And it's like, Mom, I need to spread my wings and grow up. So I started my YouTube channel by myself without asking my mom. And she was hurt by it because it was the first time I hadn't included her on purpose in something. And I didn't have any language really specifically for why or what I was doing. I just knew that like I needed to start to find myself. And that needing to find myself was the first crack in my autistic mask. And this was before I was diagnosed. And it went on for a couple of years where I was still reacting, and I was pushing my mom away. Like I was still talking to her, but also I was excluding her bit because I needed space away from her like most teenagers do. But I never did that when I was a teenager because my mask was still so firmly entrenched in survival mode. Because without my mom, I knew I couldn't survive on my own. My mom, as an undiagnosed autistic person, my mom's support meant everything. And again, none of this was on a conscious level. This was all unconscious. But then I was hitting burnout also around the same time that my mask was cracking. And I was running on fumes. I was exhausted. My kids were hitting autistic burnout and they were not diagnosed either. So then parenting got even trickier because now I had 2 burnt out teenagers. And my mom was really confused what was going on because I was too. I couldn't even give her any information because I don't know. Just everything was chaos. And then my kids got diagnosed autistic and ADHD. I got diagnosed autistic ADHD a month later. And I told my mom, and then we realized that she was also autistic ADHD. She has not gone in for a formal evaluation, but like it's obvious where it came from. And then we also realized that her dad is also autistic ADHD, or at least autistic. I don't know if he was ADHD. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. But one of the more recent conversations I've been having with my mom is that telling her like it's not fair. This isn't fair at all because she didn't do anything wrong. She had a child in the very, very tail end of 1979. I was born in December of 79. This curl has been bothering me through this whole video. It's tickling, but it's, okay, anyway. And back then, kids were not evaluated for autism. My autistic mask was so strong that I was just a good little girl. I didn't bother anybody. So teachers loved me. The only kids that were getting diagnosed were problem children. The children who aren't a problem just sailed through the system, crying at home by themselves. So it's not fair to my mom that my mask protected itself from her, because she was actually way ahead of her time as far as mental health went. She would make sure that, like, my sister, for instance, had a therapist, but I was the perfect good little child. Of course I didn't need a therapist. I'm saying that very sarcastically because I did, but my mask would not allow me to show it, ask for it, or even think about it, because that would put more work for my mom, and my mask's job was to make my mom's life easier. She didn't deserve that. She deserved to be a parent that knew what was going on with her kid so that she could help me. I never communicated that to her. And I'm also not saying that she's completely faultless, because, for instance, in 4th grade, I had a teacher that bullied me. Now, again, as most of y'all know, I have a memory disorder, so I don't remember the bullying specifically. I have semantic knowledge, so I know it happened. My mom's talked about it. Other people, my sister kind of remembers it. She had the same teacher 4 years later. But basically, this teacher bullied me, and adults should not be bullying children, but it happened, especially back then. And my mom asked me if she wanted to go. My mom asked me if I wanted her to go to the principal to talk about this teacher. And of course, my mask was like, no, don't get involved. Do not go to the principal, because that would make my life harder with this teacher. She should have advocated for me. She should not have listened to a 4th grader that said, don't get involved. She should have said, yeah, I get why you're saying that, but this isn't right, and this teacher needs to be reprimanded, or you need to be out of this teacher's classroom, or whatever needed to happen. But back then, once again, parents didn't really do that as much, because, like, it just wasn't a thing. But, and I'm not saying my mom would have, she would have, but I begged her not to. She should have still done it anyway, because a 4th grader doesn't know enough about the world to know that a teacher should be allowed to continue bullying me, because it really affected a lot of my life. Anyway, but overall, my mom was an advocate. She was, like, always supportive. She would go out of her way to make sure that, all of our needs were met. Emotionally, physically, as much as she could, and as much as my mask would clue her in, because parents are not mind readers. I now have my own teenagers, and there's things that my teens are sharing that, they were worried about when they were young that I had no idea about, because we're not mind readers. So my mom and I have been in conversations talking about, how to navigate a relationship going forward. If I could remove all constraints and figure out what I would like in a mother-daughter relationship, trying to create that newly from my perspective, and then seeing what she wants from a mother-daughter relationship from her perspective, and for us to find a way to forge a relationship newly, because our old relationship was whatever mom said, I did. Like, I could never tell my mom no. I always would say yes to things. If I said no, I felt so guilty. I always had to have an excuse ready, like, oh, I can't because I'm busy, and I'd have to have a reason why I'm busy. And I'm not saying that my mom demanded that. My mask did that. I'm very, very specifically saying I'm not trying to paint my mom into a bad person, because I have a lot of responsibility in not communicating with my mom. But I didn't communicate with my mom because of my autistic mask, which was created as a child to survive. That's why every single autistic person, pretty much that I know, also has CPTSD, because undiagnosed autism creates trauma. And that was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I talked about it in a video, Do I Have CPTSD? Because I did have such an amazing, like on paper, perfect childhood. My childhood was like idyllic in many ways. So I was like, how could I have trauma if I had such a really good childhood? But that's not how trauma works, unfortunately. You can have a really awesome childhood, and that's why you can't compare trauma with somebody else, because there are a lot of people out there that have big T, horrible, horrible trauma, and what I've experienced is not that, and that I'm grateful for, and I'm sad that they did, but it doesn't mean or diminish the fact that my brain still responded to being undiagnosed with trauma. That means that I still have trauma responses, and I still am limited in self-expression because of traumatic responses. And I'm working through these things to free myself of the way that my brain created and developed itself to protect a little child that was just trying to get by in the world and make life easier for their single parent. I think that for a lot of late diagnosed autistic people, navigating relationships going forward as you're unmasking takes a lot of intentionality, takes a lot of communication. If you have access to it, it takes therapy. It takes breaking down what was the mask and what is it that you want and need out of life. It's learning to say that you're valid and that you deserve to take up space, and that your wants and needs are just as valid as everybody else's. That you are an adult now, and that you don't need to survive in the same way that you did as a child. There's a lot of adults who still have to mask at work because we're still in survival world, in a capitalistic society. But like in your personal relationships, learning to take up space and demand boundaries that make it so that you can navigate relationships equally with the people in your life. I hope this video had some kind of nuggets of wisdom in there that help you. I've had a lot of people tell me, and I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that I have a way of explaining things that makes things make sense to them. And so I really strive to keep that going. Sometimes, like today, it's like I feel like it's hard to get my words going, getting started. But I think I did end up getting everything said that I wanted to in this video. Feel free to ask any questions, and until the next one, bye guys.